Rotimi, thank you for joining us today. So I wanted us to quickly take a look at, because the market has been mostly down this year, but there have been a few bright spots. Some of those stocks that have actually emerged as the year-to-date best performers. I'm seeing Dangote Flour leading with over 227% gain. I think last year was it Dangote Sugar that was one of the best performing stock for the year. Now we have Dangote Flour, and interestingly, from the consumer goods sector, this is a sector that's taken a beating this year. But just your general thoughts on some of those best performers that you've seen so far.
Well, I think for Dangote Flour, we've seen it very down at a time, and thereafter we've seen the price going up considerably. And I think the reason for that is not far-fetched, because the ownership is changing hands. Olam is taking over Dangote Flour, and ultimately is going to get delisted from the market. So I believe it's a value proposition from Olam that has actually helped the price of Dangote Flour to maintain that kind of surge.
Okay, Rotimi, hold that thought for us. We're just going to quickly go back to Abuja, the National Assembly, where President Buhari is reading out now the budget estimates, the 2020 appropriation bill being presented to a joint session of the National Assembly.
My Independence Day speech. Under the Presidential Power Initiative, we will modernize the national grid in 3 phases, starting from 5 gigawatts to 7 gigawatts, then to 11 gigawatts by 2023, and finally 25 gigawatts afterwards in collaboration with the German government and Siemens. Budget deficit is projected to be 2.8 trillion naira in 2020. This includes drawdowns on project-tied loans and the related capital expenditure. This represents 1.52% of estimated GDP, well below the 3% threshold set by the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007 and in line with the ERGP target of 1.96%. The deficit will be financed by new foreign and domestic borrowings, privatization proceeds, signature bonuses, and drawdowns on the loans secured for specific development projects. Nigeria remains committed to meeting its debt service obligations. Accordingly, we provided the sum of 2.45 trillion naira for debt service. Of this amount, 71% is to service domestic debt, which accounts for about 68% of the total debt. The sum of 296 billion naira is provided for the sinking fund to retire maturing bonds issued to local contractors. I am confident that our aggressive and re-energized revenue drive will maintain debt revenue ratio at acceptable and manageable levels. We will also continue to be innovative in our borrowings by using instruments such as Sukuk, green bonds, and diaspora bonds. Our government remains committed to ensuring the equitable sharing of economic prosperity. Our focus on inclusive growth and shared prosperity underscores our keen interest in catering for the poor and most vulnerable. Accordingly, we are revamping and improving the implementation of the National Social Investment Program through the newly created Ministry for Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development. The National Social Investment Program is already creating jobs and economic opportunity for local farmers, and cooks, providing funding to artisans, traders, youth, and supporting small businesses with business education and mentoring. The provision of 65 billion naira for the presidential amnesty program has been retained in the 2020 budget. Furthermore, to fast-track the rebuilding efforts in the Northeast region, a provision of 37.83 billion naira has been made for the Northeast Development Commission. The 2020 budget.
President Muhammadu Buhari reading out some of the estimates of the 2020 budget being read out to a joint session of the National Assembly taking place right now in Abuja. Rotimi Fakayejo, stockbroker and capital market analyst, still in the studio with us. Rotimi, let's quickly hear your thoughts on some of the things that President Buhari just said. What caught my attention from what he just said was the debt amount for the debt service for 2020, 2.45 trillion naira for debt service. Quite interesting.
Well, I won't say interesting, very bizarre. It's not something that we bargain for and we have find ourselves in. And funny enough, there's still going to be further borrowing for the year 2020 budget in order for them to be able to implement it further. So using a quarter of the entire budget to service debt and also going further, deeper into debt, I don't think, I believe we are headed where we may not really like ourselves to be.
But he did say that, right, the government will continue to keep the debt to GDP ratio at acceptable levels. And you know, there have been many conversations around that in terms of the ceiling and where we are. Yes, we are actually not at a red alert level, but questions that have been asked are, okay, what are those, the loans, what are they being used to fund? Are they going to, would those projects pay for themselves, or are we funding consumption?
Well, it's a funding consumption. But because most of the projects they are looking at maybe basically roads, power, and all of that. And with the way it is, though they are talking about reintroduction of toll gates to the various major highways, but be that as it may, we know that the implementation of that is not going to come as quickly, and we may not even see it happen until maybe after the second half of the year, maybe when some of the major road projects will have been completed, which are already ongoing. So invariably, we are still talking about consumption. But for me, I would have expected that they would take their view away from borrowing and seeing how they can increase revenue collection. There is no efficiency yet in that
the National Assembly is suggesting, reviewing the production sharing contracts. Well, they claim that in the last 20 years, Nigeria has lost over $20 billion US, and that if we can, then they've promised to review it quickly, and they've said that once that happens, Nigeria can actually earn about 30 billion naira every month.
Well,
something worth a road worth going down on.
Well, we should expect some resistance from the other parties as well. It's not going to be that easy, because they will need to enter into various negotiations in order for them to arrive at what is going to be. If I'm already collecting X amount and you now want to reduce it to Y, then definitely I'm going to put up some red flag to you. But after due negotiation, there will be an increment with respect to what we have been getting before. But even with respect to revenue collection from companies that are actually not in the oil and gas industry, maybe from other sources, I believe the revenue collection from that space also is very, very not efficient enough.
All right, Rotimi, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. I'm sorry we couldn't take more market, but I'm sure the market is paying attention to this. And of course, going into the week, we'll see some reactions from the market. Thank you for talking to us.